Hey guys, Stefan here. So this video is going to be about Ripple's XRP token and why I'm a skeptic. So what's the background here? Ripple has been spiking up crazily lately. Now, just in the last few days we've been having a bit of a crypto market crash. So it's a lot lower now. However, it did run up at one point and become second on the overall chart. So let me just flick into screen share now. So you can see here, it is currently sitting at number 3 on the overall chart. But as I mentioned, the market cap number, well, I think in this case, there's really a lot of what's called unit bias here. So a lot of people would have basically felt FOMO, the fear of missing out, and then thought, oh, well, I can't really get a 100x return if I buy something that's $7,000, but I might be able to get it if I buy this thing that's 65 cents or whatever it is, yeah? But the problem with that is it's really just looking at it in the wrong way. It's thinking of it like they're all just equally competing to become money. But what this is which one is the best one to become sound money, yeah? So in a nutshell, the big problems with Ripple are that it's primarily what I'm going to call appcoin ideology. It's too much of a Johnny-come-lately attempt to get paid, and it doesn't have the same level of network effects. And then the other thing is it's just not going to be seen as a neutral sound money. So we'll get into a little bit more of the detail around it. So what I'm going to do now is just quickly talk through some of the products. So there's been a lot of kind of people going back and forward on Twitter and whatever else about what Ripple is and how, okay, so it's gone through a few evolutions, let's say. But anyway, the current situation now is it's basically got these, looks like these are the main products it's got. So it's XCurrent, XRapid, XVia. So what is going on is some people are saying, oh look, you don't actually need XRP, the token, to be used with Ripple's technology, which they're basically selling to banks and other financial institutions, which is sort of true in some ways, but not true in others. So from what I understand, XCurrent is kind of like a Swift messaging service replacement, which doesn't actually require you to use XRP, though it is a possibility to use XRP. And then similarly with XRapid, I think what they're basically doing with this one is it's like sort of like a foreign currency exchange product, which again, you don't have to use XRP, but the Ripple proponents and the XRP proponents believe that, well, over time, enough people will want to use the XRP token itself specifically. So that's the thing, you have to distinguish between the token and the payment network. So think of it like the money versus the payment network. So I'll just sort of quickly jump into this XCurrent just to show a little bit more example of what exactly it is. So oh yeah, there's this video here. I'll just jump very quickly through. I'm not going to play the whole thing.
Which is used to coordinate information
exchange
between
it's kind of the idea is that banks would use this product to sort of do messaging to each other and then settle with each other. So you can see
GIs and payment through the entire payment flow. First,
so as an example, you can sort of see here, the idea is that it would help them do their compliance and screening over customers who want to transfer money from one bank to another. And the idea being that you could sort of settle it instantly all at once using that technology, but not necessarily in XRP itself. So you can see here, this sample transaction is in the euro and US dollar currency pair. So that's probably the kind of the main product that you're hearing most of the news about on Ripple, but I'm still skeptical. And so the reason I would say that is I'm going to talk to this article a little bit. So this article just came out today, and it's actually quite interesting. I'll put the link in the description, obviously, and it shows some of the history of Ripple and how it started. It was a different format back then. It was kind of probably more closer to what is called a Hawala network sort of thing back then. Anyway, it's kind of gone through a few iterations, let's call them. And now it's got this thing called the XRP coin. So now, in terms of timeline, we're looking in January 2013. So one of the problems I have with XRP as a token is that the supply is massively all given to the company and to the founders, which is just a huge sort of privilege to give to the founders, which is really, you have to distinguish that against Bitcoin, which was more an open system. So what you can see here is the Ripple company received 80 billion XRP. Chris Larsen, who was previously the CEO, and I think he's now the chairman of Ripple, received 9.5 billion of these things. And then Jed McCaleb, who is known for selling off Mt. Gox, got 9.5. And then if you read later, there's kind of more about the debate that happened between them on what to do with that allocation of how many billion ripples there are, right? And that contributes to what I was talking about earlier with the unit bias. Because there's so many units, it's easier for it to have a low price and look like it's not that expensive to buy, even though really, like, you can just buy a fraction of a Bitcoin, right? And the other thing I wanted to talk, just kind of quickly run over here, was a bit of discussion here on the, I think it was FinCEN. Yeah, so you can look here and you can sort of see that there was a bit more of a, they got into trouble with the US regulator, and I'm going to touch back onto that later. But anyway, back to the point about initial allocation. You've got to consider that this company, in terms of outstanding supply right now out there in the market, there's 39 billion. The total supply, so they've got something like 60 billion of supply locked away by Ripple. Now, in fairness, the thing is, if you mention this, they'll talk about the escrow. So they've got so basically they came out earlier, they came out a little while ago and said, oh, okay, fine, well, we accept that, it looks a bit, basically it looks dodge, right? So what they've said is, okay, we'll put 55 billion XRP in a cryptographically secured escrow account. Okay, sure. So that might sort of slow down the release of these XRP all at once, and maybe helps from an inflation schedule point of view. And the idea being, every month they would, have an allocation where Ripple, the company, would receive 1 billion XRP, and then if they're not using that, they would push that back again. So it would be another 55 months and so on and so forth. So that it's like a rolling kind of supply. The problem I see with that is it's not the same as how Bitcoin was formed. It's not a neutral money. Ripple is one company where you had to be there at the start to get that allocation. With Bitcoin, it's an open source network, anyone could have jumped on and mined along with Satoshi when he started the network, he or they started the network in early 2009. This is what helps make it more of a neutral money. Yeah. The other thing is, who are you enriching when you buy these XRP tokens? You are enriching the holders, which are overwhelmingly the founders in the company. Yeah. So contrast that with Bitcoin, where miners in Bitcoin, the ones who are doing the SHA-256 hashing that secure the network, proof of work, they are the ones who receive a block reward in exchange for doing that work. So understand that sort of governance difference there, and how that helps decentralize Bitcoin relative to Ripple, which is really kind of all around one company. Despite what the Ripple proponents and the XRP people say, it's not that there's so many other companies out there all trying to build. I mean, it's a totally different ballgame. So that's where I think you've got to distinguish between the payment network versus the money. Right? So if you look on, I think on the Ripple website, they'll try to compare themselves versus other, cryptocurrencies. Although it's sort of debatable whether XRP really is a cryptocurrency, but anyway, giving them that, I think on here they try to point out that, oh, okay, look, Ripple is much faster from a technology point of view, that it can do all these use cases and that it can do so many more transactions per second, so on and so forth. But the problem with that is it's looking at it like the payment network is all that matters, when really what's truly important is the sound money component. So think of it as, you got XRP token and, Ripple's technologies such as Xcurrent and Xrapid. But on the Bitcoin side, you've got Bitcoin the token, Bitcoin the money, and Bitcoin the payment network. So they're sort of comparing these payment networks, but actually what matters is the sound money parts. So you've got to appreciate that point as well. So what you can sort of see here is if we go to the Nakamoto Institute crash course, and this one, AppCoins are snake oil. So I was just reviewing some of these earlier. I read these ages ago, but this one's quite important because it sort of shows you that this difference between the value of the token and the value of the network. Because if it's just a token that you use only to use the app, which is the Ripple, Xrapid, and Xcurrent, then it's like people would not want to hold that XRP token, right? Because if you hold more, like I said before, if you hold more Australian dollars, well, that's less US dollars that you can hold. If you hold more XRP, that's less BTC that you can hold. And there's going to be a tendency as we go on this journey of hyper Bitcoinization and just kind of deciding which one is going to become the sound money of the world, that people will all kind of coalesce towards the best one. Which of these is most marketable? Which of these allows you to store your value best into the future? And which one would people feel more comfortable to use? More likely the neutral sound money, as opposed to the money that's overwhelmingly held by one company and a few of the founders. So that's where you have to sort of distinguish in that sense. Another point that I think is worth thinking about is the nature of the token. So some people so this was in response to, so Francis was making a point. He's saying, look, Ripple is coming out and saying Santander and some of these other banks are going to use Ripple technology, but they're not necessarily using the XRP token. So he's trying to point out here that, okay, XRP is basically enriching Ripple, the company. And now one guy responded here saying, I disagree. In lieu of an IPO, XRP acts as Ripple common shares. Value will increase. Sorry, mate. I just have to disagree. As one of my other friends pointed out here, XRP does not entitle you to any claim on the profits or the assets of the Ripple Corporation. You don't get any voting rights. It's not equity. It's not debt. It's not that there's some annual general meeting of Ripple and you get to go and vote based on how many XRP you have. No. This is just it's an appcoin. It's a appcoin, and that's this whole thing of appcoin ideology. The other thing with this whole Ripple story is it's not kind of 100% clear why they even needed the token in the first place. Because one of the reasons they say they need the XRP, I can't remember the actual link to the documentation. I think it was one of these. But anyway, the point is, they were saying they need this because it's essentially spam protection. But if spam protection was all they needed to do, and this is kind of really operating amongst in a permissioned environment, why wouldn't they just use some kind of identity or access management? Why wouldn't they just say, okay, it's not meant to be a fully permissionless system. These guys are just signing up banks and signing them up to all transact amongst each other. Now, if you speak to a Ripple person, they might say, oh, well, it's about inclusion, and someone else might want to also set up Ripple D and transact on the Ripple network. But coming back to what I was saying before, if you sort of view this from that prism of, is this really more like an app coin, or is it more like a sound money? I say XRP is more like an app coin. It's not really designed to be a sound money. So why would people want to kind of store all their value in it when there's better alternatives like Bitcoin? So hopefully that helps explain a little bit of that particular point. So, one other thing, yeah. So related to that, in fairness to the Ripple people, some of the Ripple people don't necessarily believe that it's going to become the sound money of the world. They accept that it's just an app. They might not kind of appreciate the deeper point about how AppCoin's value will tend down I mean, maybe there'll be some low level that it will stick at, like maybe just as a transaction fee amount that the XRP token will sit at. But there are some people who think that actually everyone's going to get on and use XRP. Now, what some of the Ripple company people say is essentially that they think XRP will be used both as the spam defense component from a technical point of view, but also in the case of exotic foreign currency pairs. So let's say in the example of US dollar to euro, well, you probably don't need an in-between currency for that because there's enough people who want to trade US dollar and euros. But in the case of some really random currency and some other really random currency, that XRP might be the bridge currency for them. But even there, I don't know that you can really design liquidity in that way. It has to come about through genuine market demand. People have a genuine demand to hold BTC, or HODL as the term is nowadays. So why would you hold XRP when this means that you cannot hold BTC, because there is an opportunity cost? So I think that's also a point that you really have to help appreciate. The other thing is that the network effects around it are far less weaker. There's far less hodlers. It's not that these are strong hand hodlers who want to hold the XRP token because they want it to be sound money and they want to end central banking and destroy fiat money. No. This is just an appcoin. They're trying to buy it, and then if anything, they're more weak hands because they're not going to be holding through sustained 1 or 2 year bear markets. They're going to be the weak hands who fly at the first sign of trouble. And then you've got to consider the network effects there as well. So I think it's fair to say with Bitcoin, there's more of an ecosystem around the development of this thing. There's futures products that are offered on Bitcoin. There's no futures products for Ripple. There's less exchanges that trade Ripple. People don't measure their profits in Ripple XRP. They measure their profits in BTC, right? Also, Bitcoin has been around for longer than the Ripple token, than the XRP token. Bitcoin's been around for about 9 years, and it's been pretty much being attacked for all of those 9 years. Whether it's a social attack, attacks on the network, attempts to change the nature of Bitcoin and fork it. There have been all manner of attacks against Bitcoin, and it has basically repelled every single one of them. So what does that tell you about the immutability of Bitcoin's ledger and Bitcoin's censorship resistance compared to XRP, which hasn't really been attacked in the same way or as much or for as long? It's like that concept of the Lindy effect, which some of my friends, my fellow Bitcoin maximalists talk about, where the longer this thing has survived, the better its chances of continuing to survive. Yeah, so the other thing is the centralization around relying on pretty much one company, Ripple, to basically push this thing, because it's much less in terms of advocacy, in terms of companies out there trying to build and create. It's kind of just Ripple, and then they're trying to sign up banks and foreign currency remittance companies and so on. Here's an analogy. So remember when you went to school and then there was a tuck shop, and that tuck shop might have been staffed by mothers or fathers of the school children. And sometimes in discussions, those schools purposely didn't want to have a private company because they wanted to have a community feel, right? Because if they brought in a private company, it's not that mothers and fathers of the children would come and work in that tuck shop or the canteen for free to help some private company. So in the same way, Bitcoin has more of a community feel around it. There's all these people who want to ideologically help Bitcoin, right? I call this sort of the die on a hill, right? Who's going to go die on a hill for XRP? I just cannot see that happening unless you're someone who's got a massive vested financial interest, and there's because of the initial distribution of Ripple, I just don't see that happening. Who's going to die on a hill for XRP? But I can think of people who colloquially are going to die on a hill for Bitcoin because they want to end central banking. That's the whole point. The whole point was to stop bailouts, and that was literally encoded into the first record in the blockchain. So you've got to consider that as well. Next point is, what market is it competing for? So, and I recognize here that there's a funny, famous, I think it's attributed to Einstein, and he's saying something like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing that it is stupid. So maybe there's something to Ripple in terms of the technology component. It may well be a good technology that helps banks and financial institutions and foreign currency remittance and so on, helps them save money. But it's not necessarily going to be a good sound money, the XRP token, that is. And that's the crucial difference. And even I remember seeing in one of the recent YouTube interviews with Ripple's CEO, I think his name is Brad Garlinghouse, I think. Anyway, he himself said he's long Bitcoin and that he sees it as a store of value. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing this point up is that there are some Ripple XRP supporters who seem to think that this token itself will become a sound money, and that's where I'll have to disagree. So, in terms of what market is Ripple and the XRP token competing for? Swift, foreign exchange? Those are much, much smaller than the global market for money overall. Right? So if you're thinking about which of these tokens has a kind of a higher ceiling value, well, I would say, and look, full disclosure, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. I believe Bitcoin is going to become the world reserve currency. I could be wrong. Maybe I'll be eating humble pie, but that's my current belief is that that we're going to be moving towards a world where there's one dominant sound money, where it's kind of winner takes most. It might be 80% Bitcoin and 20% other smaller coins and gold and whatever else. But in that world where we've got, global wealth today of about 280 trillion, and, Bitcoin is going to, become a big part of how we, store our value, how we use it as a medium of exchange, and we use it as a medium as a unit of account. I think the ceiling value for Bitcoin is so much higher, rather than just what people are doing, what the value of something like Swift technology is now. So if I were to be as charitable as possible to the Ripple case, I would suggest that Ripple may well be successful at getting banks on board and getting people to use their services, but the XRP token itself would be used in an appcoin sense only, not as a money, which is what counts. So, in summary, I think Ripple's XRP doesn't go deep enough, so to speak, due to choices made by the Ripple company to try and sort of allocate so much of the initial allocation of the 100 billion tokens, or now the 60 billion tokens, to itself and to its founders. And also the Ripple company, as we pointed out earlier in that BitMEX report, has had to make various kind of concessions to the regulator about having to KYC, AML, this, that, and the other, implementing freezes and so on. Well, all of those things go against the idea of having this sound money, censorship-resistant, neutral money. So, the XRP token will not become a sound money like Bitcoin could well do. Bitcoin is kind of aiming, if it's successful, it's aiming to become civilizational infrastructure. It'll be used by people to store their value, to save it from inflation, to save it from other capital controls, and it's a neutral sound money that anyone could have participated in from day one. So hopefully that helps explain why I'm skeptical about XRP, and I believe Bitcoin is really the way to go. Thanks, guys.